Hello, YouTube. Hope everyone is doing well. Live stream today. Tuesdays, we're chatting. Fridays, we are training. So, we're having a conversation today. We're going to talk about knee pain and solving knee pain, something that virtually everyone in strength sports deals with, from powerlifting to Olympic lifting to strongman. It is very reliably going to happen. Now, up there is a QR code. I released a free PDF with Bulletproofing Your Knees with some exercise examples. So definitely go ahead and pop your phone on the QR code there. I'd be more than happy to help you out. 100% free, just information for you to be able to train pain free. Now, let's talk about knee pain, generally speaking. There are multiple different types of knee pain. And the craziest thing is the most common diagnosis of knee before. Uh, Now, is your kneecap, femur is your thigh bone. Syndrome, in this case, is talking about pain. So it's basically telling you that you have painful knees. The most common way that people try and talk about that is, and solving that is, strengthen your teardrop of your quad, which is vastus medialis. And they go so far as to say vastus medialis oblique, as though one part of your quad is going to pull your kneecap back into. That is the cure. It is. Sorry, guys. It looks like I am lagging. Dalton, welcome to the live. I'm going to see if I can move to a place that has slightly better Wi-Fi. I just need assistance to move the camera as well. Hooah!
We're going on an adventure.
We're still live. What do you think? We'll do it here? Okay. Sorry, guys. And we're back. Hopefully this is better. We'll fix the camera in a minute. But all right, we should be all good. All right, let's get back to conversation. So again, right up here is the free PDF for knee pain. If you don't want to listen to me blabber on, hopefully you do, but if you don't, go ahead and download that free PDF. It's going to go through a lot of the stuff I'm talking about. Now let's get back to diagnosis. Patellofemoral syndrome. When you have pain underneath your kneecap, this is what you're going to be told is happening. And it just basically means your knee is sore. It tells you absolutely nothing. It's theoretically your patella is not tracking properly, and if you strengthen part of your quad, it's going to get better. This is just not true for the vast majority of people. Unless you've had kneecap dislocations, this is not something that's going to get better with a few quad exercises. There are other reasons for your knee pain, which I'll talk about in a second. Other common knee pains are on either side. And if you have pain on either side of your knee and you have any sort of clicking or locking associated, we talk about meniscus. And your meniscus often can't repair itself depending on how bad the tear is. The locking is actually like a flap of the meniscus coming up, and the click is if it comes back down, and the lock is if it stays up. Another really common knee pain. Then we have two others. Both are tendonitis. One is tendon pain, which is just above the kneecap, and the other is just below the kneecap. Now, in both of these, the only tissue in the area is tendon. And this is why just looking at the location of the pain is really, really important. Underneath the kneecap is patellofemoral syndrome. On top of the kneecap or above the kneecap, close to your quad, is quad tendonitis. Below the kneecap is patellar tendonitis. On either side of the knee is meniscus-related issues. This is a way oversimplification, but this would encompass 95% of knee pain. In fact, patellofemoral syndrome would be 90% of knee pain. So let's talk about where this might come from. Pain underneath the kneecap, basically stressing out the knee too much. Well, this could come from the hip, it could come from the ankle, or it could come from programming. If it comes from the ankle, if we think about movement and walking, if you walk and your ankle can't move, in fact, let me just show you. If you're walking and your ankle can't move, how is that movement going to look? Well, you take here. Yeah. You take a step, and eventually your knee is going to come off the ground. When your knee comes off the ground, pressure goes through your toe. Biomechanically, pressure through the toe is pressure through the quad. Pressure through the quad is pressure through the knee. So you can see a restriction of movement at the ankle means that your knee is going to take the load. Well, where's it taking the load from? It's taking it off of the calf. Because if I can move further range with my ankle, then I'm going to push off my calf and extend with my knee at the same time. So the less ankle range of motion you have, the more likely you are to get knee pain. Next up is going to be your hips. If we have limited range of motion at the hips, there's going to be another problem when it comes to knee pain. Well, why? If we think about up chain from the knee and our ability to flex through the hip, if we cannot flex efficiently through the hip, again, we have to push forward through the knee. Think about squat patterns. If we squat in a knee dominant way, let's say Olympic lifters, very upright torso, and knees are pushed all the way forward. Well, this is obviously going to put more pressure on the knees than a powerlifting style squat where the hips are set back and the knees don't push as far forward. And we're incorporating posterior chain glutes, hamstrings, and spinal erectors as much as we are quads. Now, that movement pattern is not a problem in itself, but those are the two reasons why hip and ankle are very important in the conversation of knee pain. The third part of this is your programming considerations. And programming considerations in terms of how much are we locally loading the knee. We have progressive overload, and we always consider this as a systemic problem. But if we think of this as a local problem, how much load are we putting through the knee in any given way? And this is where we have acute injuries. If you squat and change your movement pattern, your knee caves in and you get knee pain from that, okay, fine. That is an acute overload problem. Is the knee coming in itself a problem? Not necessarily. If that's how you always move, you can absolutely move in that pattern on a regular basis and your body adapts to it. And a lot of people are fine. In fact, you'll see some Olympic lifters actually have their knees cave, almost touch in the ascent of a squat. Reason for this is not because of weak glutes necessarily, but adductor magnus, large glute muscles, are actually one of the largest contributors to hip extension force. So that's why that happens during squats. It's a biomechanical advantage, just like rounding your low back, that your body is taking advantage of, which you can only do to a certain extent. But if we think about our programming and the way in which we move, how often are we using knee dominant movements relative to what our knees are capable of? Now, that's going to be individual, and those three things of how much are you going to be capable of, like I talk about all the time: sleep, nutrition, life stress. If those three are managed, you're going to be able to increase your volume and vice versa. So, if we're thinking about total load through the knee and how can we maximize our effort through the lower body without putting too much load on the knee, we have to focus first on our movement patterns. And so, a high bar squat is going to cause a lot more pain than a low bar squat. We have to think about the total load put through the joints. So, say something like the yoke, even though we're not moving a ton, we're still slamming maybe close to 1,000 pounds through the knee compared to a maybe 600-pound squat. And then we have to think about, are we using one leg or two leg? A single leg movement is often considered less injury risk than the double movement because you use less than half the weight. And so if I can squat myself personally, right now I could probably squat about 880 pounds. If I can squat 880, how much could I split squat? Well, I could probably only split squat maybe 400. And so instead of that knee dealing with 40 pounds of load, it's only dealing with 400 pounds of load. This is another way to temper the amount of load going through the knee. That's the general broad strokes programming conversation. I'm going to get to a few questions about whatever you guys want afterwards. But I want to talk about my favorite few exercises to solve your knee pain over the short term. One is going to be a back sled drag. Now, you have to do this in a particular way. You're leaning back and you're pushing. Now, it's easy to push with your quads where your full foot is on the ground the whole time. But I want you to couple that motion with pulling your toe up as well. Ben Patrick, the knees over toes guy, has made tibialis anterior training really common and really popular. Now, if we strengthen pulling our toe up, which is just to the front of our shin, on the lateral side, if you pull your toe up, you're going to feel that tibialis anterior muscle flex. If we strengthen that muscle, our capacity for ankle flexion is going to be higher. It's going to result in natural inhibition of calves. If we get a little bit more strength and movement through the ankle, like I said before, that's going to limit the forces surrounding the knee. Next up is terminal knee extensions. This is a really common one given when people have knee pain, but it's a way to load the quads without loading the knee at all. You're going to put a thick band around the back of your knee and attach it out in front of you. Stretch that band back as far as you can so that your toe is on the ground, but your heel is off because it's pulling your knee forward. Then you extend your knee, push your heel into the ground. Do a handful of those, and your knees are going to be, your quads are absolutely burning without causing any sort of pressure through your knee, any excessive pressure through your knee, I should say. The last exercise that I love is called a good morning squat. A lot of people, they do squats in a very upright manner. A lot of people cut their squat short in terms of range of motion this way because they feel like their torso needs to be pointed up. But there's a difference between your torso pointed up, as though my chest is pointed at the camera, and your torso is up as though you're not caving relative to your upper body. So if I'm squatting, my chest is up, and I drop down like this, just up and down, that's going to be very difficult to get the knee range of motion, ankle range of motion that's required. If I come here and I cave like this, my chest is down, right? But if I keep my chest up and I hinge at the waist, my chest is still up. And so if I do a full squat, I can keep my chest up and squat all the way. Well, my chest is pointed at the ground, but it's up relative to my torso compared to this, where now my chest is down relative to my torso. When we think about chest up during squats, it doesn't mean you can't set your hips back. So in a good morning squat, what I want you to do, sorry, we'll do one over here. What I want you to do is get the bar on your back, take your squat stance, start into a good morning, get halfway there, and then drop into your squat. So you can get used to loading the posterior chain before you drop down. And that way we're not trying to squat like this all the time. I mean, you can see I can only get to about there before my ankles run out of room. Like I said before, ankles run out of room, knees are going to have to take the load. So that is my Spark Notes. I'm going to answer a little bit of Q&A on whatever you guys want. But again, if you check out that guy there, that is a free PDF explaining what I just talked about in a little bit more detail. Would love to be able to help you guys out. So go ahead and check out that free resource. But let's pop on and say hello, everyone. All right. Hopefully everyone's doing well. Hopefully everyone is having a good day. Here's a good one. Hey, Mitchell, you're going to talk about knee sleeves. Knee sleeves are a really good tool to prevent the knee pain, but I don't like to become reliant on them. I like to have certain times a year where I take the knee sleeves off and I'm able to squat without that. Now, what this does exactly is it creates more of a distracting pressure around the knee when you squat. Think about that compressive force on your knee. As you squat down, that knee sleeve is going to bunch up a bit in the back and it's going to stretch in the front. When it bunches up in the back, you can think this is now an extra little bit of cushion, just like your hamstring popping off your calf in a very strong person. That little extra bit of compression around the knee, but also distraction, that just creates this level of stability that gives a lot of comfort. I will say this is not preventing any injury other than keeping your knee a little bit warmer. It just makes things feel more comfortable, especially with the patellofemoral pain, for sure. Dalton back, not missing a live. Good word, man. I hope that you're able to stay on for the whole thing. Dalton actually has taken this one step further. He sees the girls at my clinic to help him move pain-free on a regular basis. Chelsea, I hope that helps you. If you have any particular questions, feel free to pop them in, and I'm happy to answer them as well. Toby says, my knee pain disappeared when I started running, which is the opposite of what happened. Well, yeah, it is the opposite to what happens for a lot of people. But let's talk about the misnomer of knee pain when you run, or knee pain when you exercise, or any pain when you exercise. When you run, it increases cartilage turnover, so it actually improves your ability to have soft tissue in the knee. That whole wear and tear thing, it is a non-existent factor if you rest and recover adequately. The difficulty is a runner. Let's say you're not pushing yourself to the absolute limit when naturally you're going to be more predisposed to pains. But a runner who just runs every day, say 5 kilometers a day or 3 miles a day, just to be healthy, eventually that person might develop knee pain. But we have to acknowledge that virtually everybody is going to feel arthritic pain at some point in their life. And you're more likely to feel that arthritic pain if you're demanding yourself to run multiple miles a day. If that same person stopped running and they just walked around and lived a normal life, they probably wouldn't feel any pain at all. So it's a catch-22. Running is not directly painful to your knees. Also, at that link, I have a guide to running for strength athletes. I think running is a really important skill and quality and capacity to be able to have for a lot of reasons. And it's more about how you progress yourself into them than doing them in the first place. Yeah, my knees hate me when I do too many hack squats. This is because this locks you into the position where your torso is upright and your knees have to shoot forward. This is a major this is a major problem. Sorry, guys. Yeah, yeah, that's okay. But locking yourself into that position where your knees shoot forward, always going to cause more knee pain. Definitely. All right. Experience with Osgood Schlatter's pain. Not quite knee pain, but close enough. Yeah. So Osgood Schlatter's is a description of patellar tendonitis when you feel the pain at the insertion on the patella and the insertion on the tibia on both sides. You deal with this like you deal with every other form of tendonitis. Now, I talk about this in this PDF. I didn't mention it today. But the way to deal with this tendonitis is manage load, recover adequately, introduce isometrics, and then introduce eccentrics. The nature of tendons is that they don't have their own blood supply, so they recover very slowly. That adaptation period is longer for soft tissue than for active tissue or muscle. So you can do an exercise and feel like, I'm totally fine. I can do a lot more because your muscles are ready, but your tendons will continue to degrade. So this is where deload weeks come in. Isometrics, say for Osgood Schlatter's, very common to do wall sits or single leg wall sits. There's normative data online for wall sits, and if you go and check that out and you're a strength athlete, you should be able to exceed that the norms by quite a margin. So test yourself on single leg, on double leg, and see. Maybe you're just not that strong in those positions. And if you're not, go ahead, of course, train those. But isometrics like wall sits, eccentrics like very slow squats, and anecdotally, I see really good results with Spanish squats and with terminal knee extensions. If you don't know Spanish squats, check them out. That is the number one exercise for keeping your quads strong in a squat pattern when you have knee pain. This is a squat variation that I have seen very little exacerbation of knee pain. You can almost do the Spanish squats without any knee pain at all in most cases for people who traditionally have painful knees. Scrabble Face, hey dude, just want to send some good wishes. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right, Felipe, any tips for cartilage issues? Not any tips directly. You can take collagen as a supplement. It can work to a degree, but it's not a catch-all. It's not a bulletproof method. Oftentimes, once you lose your cartilage, it's not coming back. And arthritis is a description of decreasing joint spaces, which is a degradation of cartilage. Now, having a degradation of cartilage and having arthritic pain, not necessarily the same thing. Everyone gets arthritis. Not everyone develops arthritic pain. Arthritis is really a description of that decreased joint space. This will happen over time for everyone. But how do we minimize the pain that you feel when that happens? Well, then we talk about general strengthening. We talk about recovery. We talk about increased cartilage turnover. We talk about the value that exercise has in increasing the fluid content in your soft tissues. We talk about the ability for nutrients to come in and out of those tissues with regular movement. So the answer to this is, how do we structure a program for you where you can train your lower body without exacerbating that pain? And that should alleviate the pain over time. Very individual question, not something that I can totally come up with the answer now, but those are the principles to attack something like that. Josh says, after 2 knee surgeries in high school, I stopped squatting because of the pain. Turns out all I needed was a cheap pair of sleeves. Yeah, look, sometimes the sleeves, they do magical things, and it's not something that can be described through any sort of physiology or biomechanics, but sometimes you just need a hug, and that hug around your knee can be really, really useful. So glad you're back squatting, mate. Knees can be a frustrating thing. And like I said, most common knee diagnosis when you're in pain is patellofemoral syndrome, which is not a diagnosis, which is just telling you that your knee is in pain. So oftentimes they can't even really tell you or identify what it is. So the fact that they mysteriously disappear when you do something like that and add sleeves, it can happen. So if you're dealing with knee pain, sleeves can be a really good go-to. Dalton, is it weird that in the rare events I get knee pain after heavy squats, I look at it as a sense of accomplishment? That's not the healthiest way to look at it. I understand, like I get that masochism. I like that masochism to be on my muscles though, not really on my joints. But I know I know what you're saying. Ependa, I bike every day, saves my knees and back. Be wary of taking advice from PED users. Oh no, allegedly. Look, there are improvements to recovery, of course, but I'm talking not about my personal experience, but about my experience clinically with my master's degree in clinical exercise physiology, with my clinic helping people with knee pain, knee replacements, joint replacements, all of that stuff. So, moderators, what are you doing? Dalton, I can tell you for hip pain and bad mobility, working online for this clinic called Longevity Next Time has been a serious game changer. I'm glad it's helped you, Dalton. This is my clinic. I don't see anyone. I just support the people who do. So yeah, Dalton, it's your work. Commit to the process. Good work, man. Here's one, Chelsea. I've been having knee pain. I think it's related to hip mobility limitations on that side. Any recommendations of what could help? Look, if you have issues getting your knees out and sitting between your knees, so to speak, and you can't set your hips back, the reason is if you feel it deep in your hip, especially if it's some sort of pinching pain in your hip, that your internal rotation is limited. So when it comes to mobility, all you have to do is find something that works on that mobility and then reinforce. So for you, I would say before your squats, work on your hip internal rotation, which if your knee is at 90 degrees here, it's coming in towards your body. Everyone will feel a pinch sensation at some point, and it's actually used to see how deep your hip sockets are. That's a whole nother can of worms that I could open, but I won't today. But if you can work on bringing your hip into internal rotation and getting that range, which simple Google will give you lots of exercises for that, that's going to help free that up and then reinforce that with loaded squats. But it's often, almost always related to limitations in hip internal rotation. We then also get into a conversation of, well, potentially you just genetically have hips that are deep set in the joint. And if you do, there's not a lot that you can do about that other than continue making your feet wider and driving your knees out more. But then it's going to require more and more mobility from your groin to get into those positions. So I would say work on hip internal rotation and reinforce that immediately after with your squats and see if that feels like it frees up some space. Felipe, already having 2 ACL surgeries. I need the knee sleeves, at least for the heat that they give. Any tip for cartilage issues? I gave my 2 cents on cartilage, but it's really good programming. And if you have an ACL tear when you're young, if you don't have it surgically repaired, or even if you do, if you don't have it surgically repaired, 100% you will need a knee replacement because of the cartilage deterioration. If you have had it repaired, it's very likely that you will later in life. So you just have to mitigate that with good structured programming, with your cardio being done on a bike, with limiting things like deceleration when you're running, because of course, ACL is stopping anterior translation of the tibia on the femur. If you can't stop that as well, really difficult. Now, the exercises that I do love for this and are really well researched, Nordic curls and eccentric lying hamstring curls. If you can get your eccentric hamstring strength increased, that's going to stop the progression of the deterioration of the cartilage, because eccentric hamstring strength performs the same function as your ACL to the point where some people don't even need them. But you need to work really, really hard on that strength. So if you're doing, say, lying leg curls, having a friend bring the weight up and then resisting that for 5 seconds on the way down, massively useful, but it has to be very, very heavy because your hamstring attaches on the backside of your tibia. That then will pull your tibia back into a good solid position. And that shifting of that joint is what we can't have because, of course, that's going to wear away at the cartilage pretty quickly. Here we are. What about pain in the back of the knee? What could cause that? I started having that after I started doing barbell hack squats. Right, pain in the back of the knee. Less common, but it exists. Often because of a muscle called the popliteus. Now, the popliteus starts on the inside of your femur and attaches over on the head of your fibula. Now, it wrapping around the back of your knee, it can spasm, and it is right here. If you put a ball or something into the very top of your calf and you can find an extremely sensitive spot, that is going to be your popliteus. Now, solving this is very difficult, and it's basically stop doing the thing that's causing the spasm, coupled with active release in some way. And so if you can get some sort of lacrosse ball, exercise ball, and put that on the back of your knee just below the joint and put a lot of pressure into that, that's a way to stimulate your Golgi tendon organs, which are receptors of that muscle, that they can allow the muscle to relax. And that should alleviate some of the knee pain in the back of your knee. Now, you'll see I've used a wrist wrap before, and I've put a wrist wrap just below the knee joints. A lot of people will use that for patellar tendon pain. For me, I was using that to put pressure on the popliteus muscle. If I put pressure on that, it feels much better, and it will for you as well. So a tight knee sleeve, or have some type of wrap just underneath your knee. Of course, loose enough that you can still move, but enough that there's support. That can definitely give you some help. Here's one. Do you think red light therapy can help? Absolutely. Yeah, I've got one sitting 10 meters away from me. I use it twice a day, and it's actually really, really good. The research on it's really good. My personal experience with it has been really good. So I work with a company called RLT Home. The evidence on a particular wavelength, which is 1064 nanometer, is phenomenal. It penetrates much deeper in the tissues than less wavelength. And it gives a full spectrum, and it gives the most 1064 of any company out there. So they're the ones that I back. Darren, I am 3 months post patellar tendon surgery. That is tough. I'm being told it will take almost a year to get back to full strength. To me, it seems like a long time. I'm only 30. Do you think this is accurate? Yes, in a way I do. It's just a really difficult thing to come back from. Especially if it was a complete rupture, that is pushing shit uphill for sure. There are things that you can take. Peptides absolutely can help you. The stack of BPC 157 and TB 500 is phenomenal. That being said, most places you're not able to just get it. It's a research compound in a lot of countries. So personally, I haven't seen any negative effects. They haven't identified anyone going overboard with it or taking too much. And I've heard of some pretty crazy things. But it's not messing with your hormones. It's not messing with your overall health. It's not changing your blood work. But it absolutely helps repair those tissues. So if you're desperate to get better quicker, that can be a way to do that. Chelsea, also, any thoughts on reducing volume or limiting RP when rehabbing pain? Yeah, look, pain is going to be your limiting factor. You don't want to do anything that exacerbates pain. As a rule of thumb, first level of pain is pain in the moment. Second level of pain is just after the exercise. And third level of pain is always. And so if you think you're doing something that causes pain in the moment, but doesn't cause any pain after and doesn't cause any pain tomorrow, not the end of the world. And so as strength athletes, we kind of have to accept there's going to be a level of pain always. And that level of pain is going to be, it's going to have to be measured on how lasting is it and how inhibiting is it? Because of course, any sort of pain is going to inhibit muscular contraction. So if you can lift heavy loads and there's a bit of pain, but you feel no pain after tomorrow, not the end of the world, and you can continue rehabbing. But Chelsea, in your case, I think if you can get your movement pattern correct, if you can increase the internal rotation in your hip, you might be able to squat without knee pain within a couple of weeks. So attack that really well and see if that doesn't help you out. Here's a good one. Patrick, hey Mitchell, just joining the stream now. I'm not sure if you already went over this, but at what point do you think people should start wearing knee sleeves? I don't think that this is like a deadlift suit where you need this base level of strength before going to it. Knee sleeves don't change your movement pattern. It doesn't substantially change what you're doing. It just provides a bit of support. So if you have the capital to just go buy knee sleeves, I don't see a problem with that. I think I would start with a lighter knee sleeve, like a single ply. Before you went into anything more supportive, just to make sure that it's not changing your movement pattern too much. But I do think you can get knee sleeves as soon as you would like. I think they're a great tool for sure. James, what's your thought on pendulum squats? I think they can absolutely exacerbate knee pain, but they're also phenomenal movement to increase quad strength. So it's one of those toss-ups. I would include them for someone who's not predisposed to knee pain at all, but for anyone who has it or is trying to avoid it, I think it's probably a better one to avoid than to do. Jody, do you have any specific psoas work or releases that you find helpful and directly related to knee or back pain? Look, I think this is one of those things that has been way over popularized for no particular reason. Anytime one muscle is singled out as the cure or the reason for X, Y, and Z, I'm always a bit skeptical and hesitant. So do I do anything particularly for my psoas? No, I don't. So no. And clinically, is it a major focus? Not really. I mean, the psoas attaches to your low back, sure. And if someone has uh, a hip extension limitation, sure. But I have my hip extension tested every time I go to the physio, and it's never been a problem. So I really don't worry about it. The way to test this is if you lie on a table with your legs hanging off and you hug one of your knees, keep the other leg straight. Does the other leg lift off of the table because your hip flexor is too tight? If it doesn't, it's not likely to be a major issue. Hip flexor tightness is absolutely something that is overblown in terms of its role in lower body dysfunctions, in my opinion. I don't think it's as rampant as people think it is. Even though we sit for lots of the day, I don't see that as a major problem personally, unless you're having limitations or you fail that test. I don't think it's something to worry too much about. Sean, I had patella tendonitis playing football and soccer. I found stretching the quad and hips very good for it. I had a lightweight of 80 kilos, pain-free at 130 kilos. Will tight hips and quads add to pain? Yes, tight quads, particularly if you think tight quads is going to then pull on the knee and cause more compressive forces underneath the kneecap, it can lead to pain for sure. But we have to first understand, are your quads actually tight relative to your capacity, relative to you? And oftentimes we have knee pain on one side, not the other, and our quads are equally tight. So we can't really say that that is the cause in particular. Oftentimes in repeated sprint sports, the knee pain comes from deceleration, especially deceleration after jumping. Yeah, tight quads can absolutely. I talked about tight hips more in relation to hip internal rotation and your ability to have a really good squat pattern, more so than anything like hip extension like I was talking about before. Jimmy Cricket, sometimes I wake up injured, but I tell myself it's all a lie. But Jimmy, I know you are of middle-aged nature, and so lifting at middle age, you're going to wake up with pain. I'm not 30 yet, and I wake up with pain every day, so I can only imagine it's going to get worse. Hedgehog, I screwed the cartilage in my knees from a few years of road running and martial arts. I did wear neoprene knee supports for a while, but in the end gave up both for low impact gym work. Yeah, look, it's going to be more of a programming thing in that case than it is just a you did it and it ruined your knees. If you go into something full bore, just like if you go into lifting full bore, you're going to run into some common issues there. Or if you're trying to perform at a high level, you're going to get hurt. You're going to feel pain. That's just how things go. So it's definitely a difficult balance. Matty Bryan, hey mate, thank you for popping in. Hope you're well. Out of interest, nothing to do with knees. What would your ideal comp be if you could choose events to test who is the best, strongest or best strongman? Strongest and best strongman, not the same thing. Strongest, I think strongest man on earth does a great job. Best strongman, I think the Rogue Invitational does the best job. So I think I'll leave my answer there in terms of saying, like, here are my particular individual events. Because I have no problem with Rogue testing who is the best strongman, and I have no problem with how strongest man test the strongest strongman. My only problem is I don't want to test if I'm the strongest strongman because it hurts. But here we are. I chose my sport. When is the 505 deadlift attempt? That is September 6th in Birmingham, England, with Giants Live. So if you guys want to check that out, you absolutely can. Clay Holmes, your thoughts of Kelly Starrett and function movements? I don't know Kelly Starrett in particular, so I can't give any sort of comments on them. But function movements, I assume that's their protocol, that's their system. There are so many systems out there that work well, and a lot of people that I would back. So I don't know this person in particular, but I think Ben Patrick does a great job. I think Squat University puts a lot of good information out there. I like Andrew Locke, unfortunately passed, but he gives lots of good information. He's more on back than on knees, but nonetheless, good educated information. Teddy, what's his name? I forget his full name, but Teddy, he's a strength coach on Instagram, quite big. I believe he's strength coach therapy on Instagram. I like a lot of stuff that he does. There's a lot of really good resources, a lot of good people to follow and listen to, other than myself. So, yeah, definitely make use of it. And look, if they're educated, they speak well, they seem to make sense, you like what they say, dip your toe in the water and just give something a try. In my case, it's free PDF stuff, which is up here. That's how I want to earn trust that I could do good things for you. So that's a good start for me. I'm sure they offer something similar. Start with some sort of free thing and see if that works for you. And if it does, go for your life. Sylvian, I'm old powerlifter champ. Got a lot of stuff coming out nowadays, 65 plus low. And I just want to say thank you. You're the GOAT. Thank you very much, Sylvain. Of course, over time, things are going to pop up. And when you're that age, I think it doesn't really matter what you do. You're going to have some sort of pains. The goal is to just keep moving through those pains, for sure. Hi, Mitch. What's your plans in 5 years' time? Do you think we'll still be competing in strongman? In 5 years, I don't think so. I have a lot of other business things going on that I imagine will take precedence when that comes about. But I always want to be a part of the strongman community. That's what I'll remain consistent on. How long that means that I'm competing in it, I don't know. But in terms of creating content around it, creating help for people, creating education, I think that's something that will last for a very, very long time. I do cage fighting, but I had ACL surgery about 8 months ago. How should I progress into getting back into MMA with weightlifting? I would get into weightlifting well before getting into MMA. I think you should be able to do every gym movement before you try to start anything ballistic. Forces on your body are mass and acceleration. And if we think about the acceleration on your knee, when you kick something, well, you're going from the kick speed to absolutely nothing very quickly. So that deceleration, that's why I talk about deceleration being more of a problem than acceleration, because you have to decelerate much faster than you can accelerate and resist way more forces. So I would say get into your gym work first, get into normal patterns, your deadlifts, your squats, do a lot of eccentric hamstring work, and then start dipping your toe in the water with higher velocities. All right, Chelsea. We've got a whole saga going. I should have provided more context. I think it's external rotation per the Faber test, if I'm spelling that right. This is a mid-lift injury doing 145-pound snatches, pain when squatting since. So look, if you fail the Faber test, this is not saying external rotation. This is saying your groin is too tight. So sure, it's external rotation, but for a very particular reason. If we think of tight groin, you can't have your knees flared out when you squat and drop down between your knees like I'm suggesting if you have a tight groin, right? Knees driving out and your groin being tight do not go together. So if you work on your groin being tight, then you can open up your knees and then you'll find out, is this an internal rotation problem? So with that extra information, now we have multiple steps. First step, loosen up the groin. I would personally do this through some sort of foam rolling or Theragun work straight before squatting, then start squatting with a bit of a wider stance, and then go into see if you have an internal rotation problem. The difficulty with snatches is since you have to keep your torso upright, you have to push your knees forward, so you don't have a lot of choice. So then I would go to Spanish squats, terminal knee extensions to be able to tolerate those forces better and strengthen your quads in those ranges. I would also go a lot to ankle mobility work and hammer away at ankle mobility work because you can't squat like a powerlifter if you're trying to get back to snatching. Now, if you are trying to get back to snatching, focus on sending your hips, or sorry, if you aren't trying to get back to snatching, focus on sending your hips backwards. And if you can set your hips backwards, then you're going to be in a much better spot. All right. I'm going to answer a couple more and then I'm getting out of here. Matty Bryan, this one's to do with knees. I turned 30 last year. My knees just started hurting more that day too. Yeah, it's a rite of passage, isn't it? All right, here's one. Paget 13. Paget 85. My eyes. Did you see the study on Eddie Hall that found his sartorius and gracilis, etc., are much larger relative to other leg muscles versus untrained people? Odd that it was those in particular. Yeah, look, I don't know. I haven't seen the study. I haven't seen where it's been done. But if you study any individual, you're going to find these extreme anomalies. And I'm not even talking high performance individuals. If you study any person, you're not going to find anyone where you look at every muscle and every movement pattern and strength of every movement. Every single person is going to have something strange about them. And that's only exacerbated when it's someone who's performed at a high level. So I haven't seen that about Eddie in particular, but I'm sure I would have the same, and Thor would have the same, and Evan Singleton would have the same, and Bobby Thompson would have the same. All of us would have weird things about us. So I wouldn't put too much weight into that in particular. Peyton, yes, I am working with Stan for sure. All right. Well, thank you very much, guys, for watching. Appreciate you all coming in. I hope you guys are doing well. As per usual, lift heavy, be kind. If you're interested in knee pain, go ahead and pop in this link here and get the free PDF to help out with your knee pain. But as per usual, lift heavy, be kind. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you